Anastasia told part of this story, but there's more to the full saga of the last Russian royal family, the Romanovs. Keep watching to learn what we know and what we don't about their bloody end. It was 1915 and World War I was in full force. The last Russian Tsar, Nikolai II, headed to the Russian front line in a final attempt to keep the Romanov dynasty's authority alive. Riots and rebellions were increasing in Russia due to the lack of food and supplies and the high death toll of war. The threat of revolution was becoming a reality. Then, in March 1917, Bolshevik revolutionaries forced Nikolai to abdicate, effectively leading to the collapse of the Russian monarchy. When offers of exile to Great Britain fell through, the family was forced into house arrest at Alexander Palace at Tsarskoye Selo, a town just 15 miles south of St. Petersburg. While life inside the palace was fairly normal for the Romanovs, guards followed the royals when they went out for walks. By August 1917, the provisional government was afraid that the unstable political situation in the main cities could get violent. They decided to move the imperial family further away for their own safety. The Romanovs were then taken to the governor's palace in a very small Siberian town of Tobolsk. 46 court attendants, including servants, joined the 5-day train trip to the family's new residence. The Romanovs enjoyed a fairly relaxed, almost happy life at the palace until April of the following year, when orders came that they had to move again. The family and servants then headed for their new and final residence at the Ipatiev house in Yekaterinburg. Life was very different at the Ipatiev house, which was a small mansion, but still a far cry from the luxury the imperial family was used to. Alexei was often ill, and the Romanov daughters endured disrespectful behavior from the guards on a regular basis. Except for short walks in the garden, the Romanovs spent most of their time in 5 small rooms on the second floor of the house. By the beginning of July, the usual guards were replaced by men from the Cheka secret police. A few days later, they would be given the go-ahead from Moscow to kill the entire family. Just after midnight on July 17, 1918, the family was woken up and taken to a room in the basement. They were told that revolutionaries were approaching and the family would be safer downstairs. The family's physician, cook, a chambermaid, and a footman joined the family in the basement. After some time, secret police commander Yakov Yurovsky walked into the room, announced the family had been sentenced to death, and shot the Tsar. While Nikolai II died instantly, the rest of the family did not. Yurovsky's guards then opened fire, filling the room with smoke and causing them to miss their targets. Some of the victims were shot several times, and others were bayoneted to death, stabbed, or attacked with the butts of the guns. It took over 20 minutes before everybody was dead. It took several tries, which included a mine shaft, grenades, and acid, before Yurovsky and his men finally dug a shallow grave for most of the bodies. The remains of 2 of the children were burned and buried elsewhere. While the revolutionary Bolsheviks took credit for killing Nikolai II, the murder of the imperial family remained a well-guarded secret for decades. It wasn't until 1979 that the mass grave was found, though things remained quiet until an investigation was launched in 1991. Once DNA confirmed the remains belonged to the Romanovs, the family, except for the 2 missing children, was buried in St. Petersburg Cathedral. Not long after, they were declared saints in the Russian Orthodox Church. But things weren't so simple for the other 2 children, who were suspected to be Alexei and either Maria or Anastasia. For starters, their bodies weren't found until 2007, and despite DNA analysis proving their lineage, the Russian Orthodox Church refused to acknowledge the findings. New DNA tests confirmed the findings in 2015 when Tsar Nicholas II's body was exhumed for DNA comparison. But in 2018, the church still insisted that, quote, more proof was needed. The church claimed they needed to be extra careful in confirming the identity of the children. They claimed their bones were considered sacred relics because of the family's canonization. The truth, however, is possibly a lot more political than religious. The grave containing the remains of the 2 children was located in 2007, not far from the main burial site, but the bodies had been burned almost completely to ash. While it's true that fewer than 50 bone fragments were found, DNA tests were conclusive. They belonged to members of the Romanov family. The bodies of Alexei and Maria have never been buried. They remain in hold at a Russian state archive because the church demands more proof that it really is them. Conspiracy theories could have come into play too. For years, there was speculation that the 2 missing children hadn't been found because they had somehow escaped and were still alive. Between 1918 and 1928, half a dozen women publicly claimed to be the missing Romanov daughter. The most famous case was the story of Anastasia Tchaikovsky, also known as Anna Anderson, who claimed to be the missing Anastasia. Anderson had spent some time in a mental hospital after a suicide attempt and was eventually helped by Romanov sympathizers to escape to the US. There, she engaged in a long legal battle to be recognized as Anastasia Romanov. She eventually lost her court battle and died in 1984. A DNA test performed a decade later proved Anderson was definitely not a Romanov. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.